No one was ready for what Jasmine Crockett walked into that room carrying. Not the reporters circling outside like vultures, not the camera crews already live, fingers trembling on Zoom buttons, and certainly not Donald J. Trump, sitting dead. Center, staring straight ahead, flanked by allies who looked more nervous than angry. Jasmine stepped out of the black SUV like a soldier arriving at the front line. Her navy blue suit wasn't just tailored, it was armor. She didn't wave, she didn't smile, she didn't need to. All she held in her hand was a tiny silver USB drive. Smooth, unmarked, silent. But inside that little piece of metal lived a secret, one that had slept in shadows for over 2 decades. And today, it was going to wake the world up. The air in Capitol Hill's room 316 felt heavier than usual. Not a storm. Not quite. More like that eerie silence before it breaks. Polished wood, crisp flags, rows of microphones already live. But even the furniture seemed tense, like it knew something was about to snap. Trump didn't move when Jasmine entered, but his jaw clenched just once. He'd heard the rumors. Everybody had. But deep down, he believed she wouldn't go through with it. "She's bluffing," someone whispered beside him. "She won't," Trump muttered, barely audible. He wasn't asking. He was hoping. But Jasmine wasn't there to hope. She was there to end it. The night before, she and her team had locked themselves in a hotel room. No one spoke much. They just watched. 97 seconds of grainy video, Trump, Epstein, laughter, angel wings, young, faces that didn't belong in that room, faces too familiar to too many. One woman in Jasmine's team had to leave halfway through. Another just sat shaking, gripping the armrest like it could anchor her to reality. This wasn't politics. It wasn't even scandal. It was a wound so deep it bled decades. Back in the chamber, the crowd had already started gathering outside. Staffers, protesters, survivors. One woman clutched a sign with a photo of her sister. Another held a poster of a young girl in a white dress, eyes black-barred but soul still visible. The caption read, "You kept her quiet. She's still screaming." Inside, the chairman lifted the gavel and brought it down once. Bang. This hearing is now in session. Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't even glance at the chairman. She stared into the camera, that little red light blinking like a heartbeat, and softly said, "Let's see what they were so desperate to hide." Trump's name was called. He leaned forward like he was about to start a speech, maybe even a joke. The old smile returned, smug, lazy, too confident. The same smile that got him through lawsuits, bankruptcies, headlines. But today, charm had no currency, because Jasmine had something stronger than power. She had truth, and she wasn't going to whisper it. She was going to press play. This wasn't a political moment, it was a reckoning. And it all started with one woman, one room, and one piece of metal holding the weight of the world. Trump turned, slow and smug, and let the venom spill. "She's just a puppet," he said, waving Jasmine off like she was beneath notice. A woke puppet with no experience, no brains, just a media mouthpiece who learned to tweet before she could think. From the far right side of the chamber came laughter, sharp and rehearsed. Marjorie Taylor Greene clapped her hands once, then laughed louder than the joke deserved. Jim Jordan smirked, arms crossed, eyes fixed on Jasmine like he was waiting for a reaction that never came. A Fox News cameraman zoomed in on Trump's grin. He knew it was theater. He wanted the world to see him as untouchable, unshaken. He leaned back in his chair like a man posing for a painting. "I've built towers," he said, loud enough for the press mics to catch. "She builds hashtags. I've made peace. She makes noise. We're not even playing the same game." More chuckles, more camera flashes. Greene leaned in and whispered, loud enough to be heard, "She's lucky to even be in this room." Jasmine turned slowly, not to defend herself, just to register it, like someone marking the wind before a storm. She didn't react, and that silence felt more dangerous than any insult could. The chairman cleared his throat. "Ms. Crockett, would you like to respond?" She didn't stand yet. She ran a finger over the USB drive beside her like it was a live wire. Then, quiet but unshaken. "Yes." That one word hit like a dropped match in a dry forest. Trump turned in his seat, eyebrows raised, expecting fire, maybe fury. But Jasmine rose like a stone being lifted from deep water. Slow, heavy, unstoppable. She looked first at the chairman, then the crowd, then finally at Trump. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't shake. It cut. "I've been called worse," she said. "But I wasn't sent here to trade insults. I was elected to tell the truth, whether you can stomach it or not. No cheers, no noise. Just that sudden, tight quiet that happens when no one dares to breathe." She reached into her folder. Not for the USB, not yet. Just a document. "I'll respond," she said, eyes locked on Trump. "But not with slogans wrapped in smug smiles. I'll respond with facts. You do remember those, don't you?" A few gasps, a cough, a flicker of discomfort across Jim Jordan's face. Even Trump blinked. His lips twitched, not into a smile, but into something smaller, more uncertain. Jasmine sat back down. No video, no reveal, just silence, the kind that makes guilty men squirm. And then, the screen came to life. No warning, just static, then a flicker. Then the image locked into place, grainy, dark, real. The angle was crooked, like someone had hidden the camera behind a column or a champagne tower. But the faces, there was no mistaking them. First came Epstein. Cream-colored blazer, champagne in hand, that smug, open grin, the kind of grin only men who believe they'll never be held accountable wear. Then came Trump, younger, leaner, tie loose, drink in hand, the other resting on the back of a girl's chair. Melania stood beside him. She looked at the camera, not shocked, not afraid, calculating, then she turned away. The room was a private suite, gold chandeliers and velvet curtains. A sign in the corner read, "Victoria's Secret, private event, invite only." The music was soft jazz, muffled like it was embarrassed to be playing there. Trump and Epstein sat shoulder to shoulder. They laughed, not like strangers, but like partners in routine. And then she appeared, a girl in a white dress, heels too high. Legs crossed like she'd been told to act older than she was. Brown hair down her back, smiling, but not with her eyes. She sat on Epstein's lap, holding a glass of something clear. She couldn't have been more than 17. In the chamber, no one moved. No one dared. Because whatever political game they thought they were playing was over. And Jasmine hadn't even pressed pause yet. The music in the video was barely a whisper now, just soft notes from a flute drifting through velvet air. Trump leaned in close to the girl. He whispered something into her ear. She gave a small, uneasy laugh. One of those laughs people make when they don't know what else to do. On the chamber floor, a staffer dropped her pen. Marjorie Taylor Greene looked down at her lap. Jim Jordan didn't blink, just clenched his jaw like it might crack. The tape kept playing. Trump raised his glass to the camera, grinning like he was hosting a cocktail party. "They're younger this time," he said. Even through the static, Epstein's chuckle landed like a slap. "Much younger," he replied. A gasp rippled through the room. A congressional aide stood up abruptly, hand over her mouth, face pale as paper. Another whispered, "Oh my God." Even the chairman leaned forward, stunned into silence. No gavel, no words. The media crew in the back didn't know whether to stop the video or let it keep going. No one had seen anything like this. Not in this building. Not ever. And Donald Trump, seated just feet from the screen, said nothing. He stared, frozen, his eyes locked on his younger self from 26 years ago. Same voice, same drink, same smirk. There was no tech excuse left. No AI. No CGI. No, it was a look-alike. It was him. And the camera didn't flinch. Jasmine Crockett sat still, silent, her breath calm, hands folded. She wasn't watching the footage anymore. She was watching the people, watching them watch it, watching them recognize what they'd let slide, what they'd protected, what they'd excused. On screen, the girl stood up from Epstein's lap. She wobbled slightly. Trump placed his hand on her lower back. Too low, too long. Then she walked out of the frame. Trump and Epstein clinked their glasses. The footage jumped. A few frames, skipped. Then it froze on one final shot. The two of them, mid-laugh, surrounded by two young girls, faces half-lit, full of secrets. Then, black screen. No fade, no outro, just nothing. And no one moved. Not the lawmakers, not the press, not even Green, whose hands were now clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. A reporter near the back leaned toward his colleague and whispered, This changes everything. Jasmine finally spoke. Just once. She turned toward Trump, calm, clear, quiet. You called it fake, she said. But the camera never lies, especially when the liar is in the room. And that's when it happened. Not from the screen, from Trump. He erupted. He jumped to his feet, color draining from his face and returning all at once as an angry, blotchy red. Fake! He barked, jabbing a finger toward the blank screen like it had just insulted him. That was altered. That's AI, CNN garbage, a smear job. His voice cracked, the kind of crack that doesn't come from anger but from fear. A fear of something he couldn't talk his way out of. Cameras caught it, the sweat collecting at his brow, the slight tremble in his hands. Green reached to calm him. He shoved her arm away. I don't even know that girl, he yelled. This is a setup. Jasmine stayed seated, composed, one hand tapping gently. The other opened a slim red folder. No performance, no rage, just truth. She pulled out a document, a printed forensic report. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. This, she said, is a third-party forensic verification, conducted by an independent digital evidence lab. She turned to the chairman, then met Trump's eyes. It confirms the timestamp, the hash, the file format, the original encoding, and the source upload metadata. No edits, no tampering. Chain of custody is clean. Every frame is intact. She handed the document to the clerk. He passed it up the bench slowly, like a sacred object. Reppers Jamie Raskin leaned forward, microphone on. His voice was low and even. That footage, he said, was sealed in a federal bankruptcy filing from 2001. It came from the Epstein estate, marked confidential, until it was unsealed just 2 weeks ago. That's where her team found it. Not CNN, not Twitter. A federal archive. There was nothing left to say. The screen was black, but the damage had been done in full color. And for the first time in that chamber, it was quiet. Not out of respect, not out of fear, but because everyone knew. The lie had lived long enough. Trump's attorney shot up like he'd been burned. His tie was crooked, his face red, his voice cracking under pressure. Objection! He barked. That video wasn't disclosed prior to this hearing. We move to strike it from the record. The room stiffened. The chairman didn't flinch, just raised an eyebrow and spoke calmly. Motion denied. The footage qualifies under public record statute. The evidence is admissible. The lawyer sat down slowly, not in defeat, but in quiet dread, like a man who knew the foundation beneath him had just started to crack. Trump gave a dry laugh, sharp, hollow, the kind of laugh that tries to mask fear. This is theater, he snapped. Political theater. You're letting some TikTok attorney smear the President of the United States with grainy club footage? Jasmine finally turned toward him. It wasn't fast. It wasn't dramatic. It was deliberate, like a turret turning toward a target that had just been locked in. That grainy footage, she said, voice low and even, was enough to make you stand up and scream. The words hit hard, too hard to laugh off. A few people gasped. Others just stared, completely still. Because for the first time, it wasn't Jasmine versus Trump. It was truth versus the entire room. And the truth had just taken its first breath. The air inside the chamber felt frozen, not cold, but suspended, like the oxygen had turned to glass. The video was over. The images couldn't be unseen. Trump had collapsed into himself, hunched forward, eyes blinking too often, as if his mind was still trying to rewrite what everyone had just watched. And then, from the gallery, it happened. A voice. Quiet. Trembling. Human. "That's my sister," a woman said. She rose slowly from the second row, her hands white-knuckled on the wooden railing, her face pale, her breath shallow. "She was 17, she said, voice cracking mid-word like it was breaking in half. That sound, that one broken syllable, sliced through the chamber like a blade. Chairs shifted. A staffer let out a sob behind her hand. Even Green turned sharply toward the voice, her eyes wide, unprepared for what came next. The woman's hands shook. She held up a faded photograph, worn thin at the corners, folded and refolded, handled 1,000 times. That was her on Epstein's lap, she said, louder now. That was the dress. That was the night. She walked out of our home and never came back. And suddenly, silence had a new meaning. It wasn't disbelief. It was reverence. Even the press stopped, recording. No one moved. No one dared. Jasmine stood. She didn't ask for permission. She didn't make a speech. She just moved. One foot in front of the other, heels soft against the marble floor. Steady, measured. Not toward Trump, but toward the woman in the gallery. As she approached, the woman's lips trembled. She looked like she might fall to pieces. Jasmine reached into her pocket and pulled out a single folded tissue. Not symbolic, not performative. Just real. She offered it gently. And said, "You are not alone." Then she leaned in, just enough for the cameras to catch her whisper, calm and unwavering. "And we're not done." The woman clutched the tissue like a lifeline. Someone behind her began to cry, quiet but broken. Reporters scribbled furiously, now heads down, hands shaking. One of them whispered into a hot mic. A witness just identified her missing sister from the footage. This hearing just became history. The camera feed cut briefly to black, then came back to a still frame of the chamber. No one could clean this up now. The chairman's gavel hovered above the desk, but he didn't strike. It not yet. Across the room, Trump stared blankly ahead, face pale, expression hollow, not angry, not defiant. Just haunted, like a man staring into the ghost of a lie too massive to bury. And Jasmine? She didn't return to her seat. She stood beside the woman, not as a congresswoman, not as a prosecutor, but as a human being. Because that's what justice looks like before it has a name. The lawyer jumped to his feet, red-faced and scrambling. "Objection! That video wasn't submitted before the hearing. Strike it." The chairman didn't even blink. "Motion denied. It's public record." The lawyer sat back down like the wind had been knocked out of him. Trump let out a laugh, short, sharp, and hollow. "This is a circus," he scoffed. "You're all letting some nobody smear a former president with grainy club footage." "Really?" Then Jasmine turned, not quickly, slowly, like a storm changing. Direction. Her voice came low, like it was carrying more than just sound. "That grainy footage," she said, "was enough to make you scream." The room fell still, not just quiet, frozen. Even the walls seemed to hold their breath. It was no longer about politics. No longer Jasmine versus Trump. It was truth versus everyone who had ignored it. And the truth had just stepped into the light. The video ended. Silence fell hard. Trump didn't say another word. He sat hunched over, blinking like a man who couldn't see what was coming, even though it was already here. And then, from the second row, a voice rose, shaky, barely above a whisper. "That's my sister," the woman said. She looked no older than 20, but her hands were clenched white on the wooden bench. Her voice cracked mid-sentence. "She was 17. That word hit the room like glass, breaking. No one moved, not even the press. A few people gasped. Someone stifled a sob. She held up a photo, old, bent at the corners, handled too many times. "That's her. That's the dress. She left that night and never came home." Not a sound. Jasmine stood, not for drama, not for show, just stood and walked, not toward Trump, but toward the girl. The girl looked like she might fall apart right there. Jasmine reached into her jacket, pulled out a tissue, and placed it gently in her hand. "You're not alone," she said softly. "And we're not finished." A single sentence, not a slogan, not a line for headlines, a lifeline. And just like that, something shifted. One voice had pierced the silence, and no one could unhear it. The reporters, now wide awake, scribbled like mad. "A missing girl identified from the tape," one whispered into a hot mic. "This changes everything." The screen flickered, briefly black, then back again. But the damage was done. Trump sat still, his face drained of everything but the weight of the moment. A man who had just seen his own reflection and didn't recognize it. Jasmine stayed standing, not as a senator, not as a symbol, but as a wall between one broken voice and the tidal wave behind her. Then she turned to the gallery. "To those who never had a microphone, you matter," she said clearly. She couldn't vote. She didn't run for office, but she mattered. She walked back to her seat, like every step carried names the world had forgotten, and when the gavel finally dropped, chaos erupted. Trump's team scattered like marbles on a courtroom floor, aides grabbing coats, files, phones. Marjorie Taylor Greene stormed out like a general retreating from a lost battle. "Draft a release," she barked. "Blame deep fakes. Get ahead of it. Now." Trump said nothing, just walked, fast, head down, like a man chased by his own shadow on a screen. Inside the chamber, no one followed. Not yet. The weight in the air hadn't lifted. Jasmine sat, calm in the storm she had unleashed. Her pen was uncapped, her notes untouched, not celebrating, just waiting. There was more. She hadn't even opened the sealed envelope in front of her. Outside, the press mob swarmed. "Did you see the footage? Do you believe the girl? Is this the end of Trump?" Greene shoved past, muttering about Hollywood effects and CGI. "It's a lie. It's always been a lie." But her voice cracked at the end. At Fox News, it was full-blown panic. Producers yelling, hosts improvising. "Cut to commercial! Roll stock footage!" But it was too late. Clips were already everywhere. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X. The hashtag Dr. Trump Epstein tape exploded, and every video had Jasmine's face frozen mid-sentence, fierce, calm, undeniable. One host tried to spin it. "We're looking into the tape's origin. This could be a smear campaign." But her own team interrupted her with a breaking news banner. GOP witness identifies missing sister in Epstein video. Back inside, Jasmine finally packed up her papers. Her staff whispered about requests pouring in. Press, DOJ, networks. She raised a hand. "Not yet," she said. "We're listening." "To who?" one aide asked, confused. Jasmine glanced toward the gallery. "To the people no one ever listened to. Until today." Out in the hallway, Trump snapped at a reporter. "It's fake. None of it's real. She'll regret this." But even his voice cracked. And it was drowned out anyway, by the sound of 100 cameras clicking, by chants from the Capitol steps, by a country finally watching. Back in the hearing room, Jasmine remained, not resting, reloading. Because once the truth is out, you can't turn the broadcast off. You can only decide what to do next. And she wasn't finished. They didn't see her coming. She wasn't a senator. She wasn't a lawyer. She was a 17-year-old girl. No title, no vote, no podium. But when she stepped forward in that hearing room, everything stopped. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She just spoke, clear and steady. And somehow it cut deeper than any speech that day. And when she turned and walked away, it wasn't just a girl leaving the mic. It felt like an entire generation rising from the shadows, step by step, reclaiming names long forgotten. Suddenly the air shifted, the gavel dropped, and Washington, the city of noise and spin, was cracked open. Trump's team scattered like a shattered dam, aides running, phones lit up, panic painted across every screen. Marjorie Taylor Greene barked orders mid-stride. Blame deepfakes. Say it's AI. Say anything. But her hands were shaking. Trump didn't say a word. He just moved fast, head down, chased by his own reflection looping on every screen. That wasn't a debate anymore. That was a reckoning. Inside the hearing room, Jasmine Crockett sat motionless. The storm she'd summoned swirled around her, but she remained calm. Not triumphant, just focused. The documents in the sealed envelope? She hadn't even opened them yet. She wasn't done. Outside, the Capitol was swarmed. Reporters, cameras, questions flying like sparks. "Did you see it? Is this the end for him? Do you believe her now?" Greene pushed past, muttering about Hollywood tricks. "It's fake. It's all fake." But her voice cracked, and no one was listening anymore. Meanwhile, in newsrooms across the country, producers were yelling. Too late. The video had already gone viral. You couldn't pull it back. The truth had slipped through the wires, shared, reshared, burned into memory. And in every version, one image stayed frozen. Jasmine, calm, focused, immovable. Like she wasn't just revealing evidence, she was drawing a line. Later, the chair recognized her again. This time, her voice didn't just carry, it landed. She didn't start with emotion. She started with facts. "In the past 10 years, she said, we've traced a quiet trail. Money, settlements, redacted names, sealed doors." She clicked her pen once. 6-figure donations from Epstein to PACs tied to Trump properties. 4 NDAs connected to those accounts. One woman's silence cost less than a dinner at Mar-a-Lago. You could feel the room lean in. Even the skeptics weren't blinking. Then she dropped this. "We have logs. Mar-a-Lago visitor records, 1998 to 2002. One entry, sealed to this day. J.D. Minor, escorted by Epstein. No one in Congress ever asked about that. I am." Trump scoffed. "Conspiracy garbage, a witch hunt." But this time, no one was playing along. The chairman didn't even look at him. "Mr. Trump, you are not recognized." Trump's jaw clenched. He was losing ground. Fast. Jasmine kept going. "These victims didn't just sign NDAs. They signed away pieces of themselves. They were told it was the only way out. The money didn't help them. It hid their pain. While the ones who bought their silence went on to cocktail parties and campaign launches." And then she paused. Behind her, the screens lit up with documents, docket numbers, transaction records. Trump's name wasn't on every page, but his shadow was. "Does this Congress care about victims?" she asked. "Or does it only care when no one's watching?" You could hear a pin drop. Even Green didn't twitch. Even Fox didn't cut away. CNN's control room whispered, "Stay live. Don't cut. This is history." Jasmine took a breath, not out of exhaustion, but purpose. Then, with the calm of a surgeon, she reached into her folder and pulled out one last document. "This," she said, holding it up like it burned, "is a wire transfer dated April 3, 2001. Amount $750,000 sent from a Trump-linked PAC. Received by a Delaware company now defunct. But back then, it helped fund Jeffrey Epstein's legal defense." Shock. Lawmakers leaned in. Screens lit up with the proof, account numbers, routing codes, bank confirmations. She hadn't redacted a thing. Trump paled. The fight in him faded. He leaned into his lawyer, whispered something. But the mic caught none of it, because by then, no one cared what he had to say. She never raised her voice. She didn't need to. In a city built on power plays and noise, Jasmine did something rare. She spoke with truth, and she made the silence listen. And maybe the question isn't whether she broke the system. Maybe it's whether the system ever deserved to stay whole. After the storm, after the viral video, the silenced whispers, the gasps, what lingered wasn't outrage anymore. It was something heavier, something final. A reckoning. Jasmine stood again. Not because anyone demanded it, but because something deeper inside her refused to sit down. The chairman gave a small nod. Not out of courtesy, out of gravity. The kind of gesture people give before a verdict. "I request time to address the judiciary," she said. Calm, not performative. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Truth doesn't shout. She walked to the microphone. Her notepad was in hand, USB still there on the desk, but untouched. This time she wouldn't need it. She looked around the room, at faces she'd fought beside and against. Some avoided her gaze, others couldn't look away. Then she began, not with anger, with receipts. "For over 10 years, she said, there's been a paper trail, hidden under fake names, sealed settlements, washed clean with silence, but it's still there, if you know how to follow it." Click, her pen capped, her facts uncapped. Jeffrey Epstein funneled over $100,000 to political committees linked to Trump-owned properties. 4 non-disclosure agreements paid out through shadow accounts. One woman's silence bought for less than a fundraiser dinner at Mar-a-Lago. No yelling, just facts, cold and flat, like a dropped gavel. Across the room, Repor's Dan Bishop tensed like he was about to object. He didn't. Maybe he'd finally learned. Jasmine pressed on. "We've obtained partial guest logs from Mar-a-Lago between 1998 and 2002. One line item reads, J.D. Minor, escorted by Epstein. Record sealed. No oversight. No subpoenas. No curiosity." She turned to the chairman. "But I'm asking now." Trump, sitting at the witness table, snapped. "This is a witch hunt. You're just reading off conspiracy garbage. This whole thing is a joke." The chairman didn't flinch. "Mr. Trump, you are not recognized. Sit down." Trump scowled and dropped back into his seat. His foot tapped. Fast, hard. He was slipping, and he knew it. Jasmine didn't blink. "When those women signed those NDAs, they weren't just silencing stories. They were carving pieces of themselves away. They thought they were buying peace. They were sold betrayal." Behind her, screens lit up with redacted court documents, sealed payment logs, the outline of names hidden but too familiar to ignore. Trump's name wasn't on every page, but his fingerprints were. She stepped back, Let the silence breathe. Let the weight of it all land in the gut. Then she said it. Either this Congress stands with victims, or it only stands when no one's watching. You could hear the shift in the room. The air changed. Even Marjorie Taylor Greene stayed quiet. Reporter Jamie Raskin leaned in like he'd just heard something that changed the floor beneath his feet. A CNN producer's voice crackled in someone's earpiece. Keep the cameras rolling. Don't cut. Away. This is history. Jasmine inhaled. Not from nerves, from release. She still had more, but she knew how to let truth land, not all at once, just enough to wake the room. She sat back down, but the silence begged for more, so she gave. Reaching into her folder, Jasmine pulled out a single page, faded, crisp, stamped with federal ink. This, she said, holding it up like a warning flare, is a wire transfer dated April 3rd, 2001, amount $750,000. Sender, a Trump-affiliated PAC called Freedom West. Recipient, a Delaware holding company, since dissolved. But at the time, it existed for one reason, to pay Jeffrey Epstein's legal defense. The gasp didn't ripple. It detonated. Lawmakers leaned forward, squinting as the blown-up document hit the screens. Routing codes, signatures, confirmations, everything. Nothing redacted, nothing denied. Trump's jaw clenched. His confidence drained. He leaned toward his lawyer and muttered, just loud enough for the front row to hear, "They found it." Then came Raskin. "I move for an immediate subpoena," he said, his voice low but resolute. "We unseal all financial records tied to Freedom West and its affiliates, 1999 through 2002. The chairman nodded. Motion received. Trump's lawyer stumbled to recover. "This proves nothing. Political donations are often misunderstood. This isn't intent. This isn't guilt." Jasmine cut in, eyes locked. Then explained why it went through a Delaware shell company, registered to the same P.O. box Epstein used for his jet. A reporter whispered over the live broadcast, "This just crossed into criminal territory." Jasmine walked back to the podium, laid the document down like a final card on the table. "We've talked about girls, about NDAs, about sealed footage, but money leaves a trail, even when people vanish. And this trail, it didn't stop at Epstein. It curved around political machines, through committees, past boardrooms and banquets, until it touched the edge of the White House. The silence was icy now, not from disbelief, but from recognition. She sat again, calm, deliberate. She knew what was coming. Because when the money leads back to the Oval Office, the questions don't stop. They multiply. Backlash didn't take hours. It took minutes. "Woke witch hunt!" one conservative show blared. "Jasmine's revenge circus!" screamed another. They clipped her speech, twisted her calm into arrogance, froze her face mid-word to make her look unhinged. She was called an extremist, a deep state pawn, a feminist radical drunk on attention. But the hatred didn't stay on TV. That night, Jasmine's office windows were cracked, liar and traitor painted in red. Her voicemail filled with threats. "You're digging too deep. Brave women end up dead." Her staff huddled, shaken. One aide, barely 25, received a photo, her own apartment door taken from outside. It had been posted just after she shared Jasmine's speech online. Another staffer begged her, "Just pause. Even for one day. We're not ready for this kind of war." Jasmine listened, quiet, heavy. Then she whispered, "Neither were they." The girls. That night, as security swept her office, Jasmine sat alone, her notes blurred, not from fatigue, but from memory. She saw her again, a 16-year-old girl in a Texas courtroom, hoodie too big, eyes barely meeting hers. Her name was Amariah. No family, no press, just Jasmine, a public defender years ago, standing between a broken child and a system that called her a runaway instead of a victim. Amariah had been recruited at a Greyhound station, promised a modeling job, locked in a motel room for 6 days, no cameras, just men. One of them had a badge. Jasmine had fought and won, technically. The recruiter got probation. The man with the badge? Nothing. Just sealed files. Another name erased. Another girl swallowed by shadows. That night, Jasmine didn't go home. She didn't sleep either. She sat alone in the quiet, her phone screen glowing in the dark. Her face splashed across every news channel, but it wasn't her face anymore. They'd twisted it, froze it mid-blink, mid-word, mid-breath, turned her into a villain in a story they controlled. She's angry. She's unstable. She's radical. But Jasmine didn't hear any of that. All she heard was a voice from 5 years ago, soft, scared, and barely above a whisper. They told me it was modeling, but it was never about pictures. The girl's name was Amariah. She was 16, alone, and wearing a hoodie that hung off her like it belonged to someone twice her size. Jasmine had been her public defender then, standing between her and a courtroom that wanted to call her a problem instead of a victim. Jasmine had won the case. Barely. But the man with the badge? He walked. No charges. Just a sealed file. Now, the stakes were bigger. The rooms were grander. But the story hadn't changed. Predators get protected. Victims get erased. And Jasmine wasn't here to soften that truth. She wasn't here to manage the backlash. She was here to be the backlash. The next morning, Jasmine's staff brought her a draft apology. Something to cool things down. She didn't even touch it. Instead, she chose the wind. No marble rotunda, no safe little press room. Just an open podium outside the Capitol, beneath a sky so heavy it looked like it might split in half. Reporters packed the sidewalk, their umbrellas half raised, their lenses trembling in the breeze. And standing there, not as politicians, but as a human wall, were 3 lawmakers who refused to let her stand alone. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Jamie Raskin, Cory Booker. AOC stepped forward first. Her voice didn't shout. It sliced. This isn't a smear campaign. What we saw yesterday? That was sunlight. And for some people, sunlight hurts. She stared straight into the Fox News mic like it owed her something. Then Raskin took the mic, sleeves rolled, folder in hand, a folder thick with subpoenas. This isn't left versus right. This is right versus wrong. We're calling on the Department of Justice to appoint a special counsel, today, to investigate every transaction, every alias, every sealed file tied to Epstein and to Mr. Trump's campaign funds. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Reporters shouted over each other. Do you believe Jasmine Crockett's life is in danger? Are there more victims coming forward? Why now? Booker didn't wait for quiet. He didn't need quiet. He didn't read off notes. He didn't need those either. He just stepped forward and spoke like fire burns. The system never feared the victims. It fears the witnesses, the ones who won't shut up. That's why Jasmine's under attack, because she broke the silence. And silence, my friends, is complicity. Inside the Capitol, Jasmine watched it all unfold from a hallway with no name. No staff, no cameras, just her and the sound of other people defending her out loud. She didn't flinch at the threats. She heard every one of them. She didn't melt at the praise either. She didn't want hashtags. She wanted hearings. She wanted names. She wanted prison doors to creak open for the right people, for once. A young aide knocked lightly and peeked in. C-SPAN's asking for an interview, he said. NPR, too. MSNBC's offering prime time. Jasmine didn't even look up from her notes. No, she said. Not yet. The aide shifted. Should I prep a statement at least? Now she looked at him. Her eyes weren't tired. They were sharp, like glass held to the light. No, let them keep talking. I'm not here to give speeches. I'm here to finish what I started. The aide walked out taller than he walked in. He didn't know what had just happened, but he knew that something in Jasmine's calm wasn't just strong. It was dangerous to the right people. Outside, as the crowd began to disperse and umbrellas snapped shut, a reporter called after AOC. Do you really think this ends in indictments? AOC didn't turn around, but her words drifted back like thunder on slow wind. If it doesn't, then this country never deserved her to begin with. That night, sleep never came. Jasmine sat in the dark, her face lit by headlines calling her unhinged, dangerous, even evil. But the noise didn't reach her. All she could hear was Amariah's voice from years ago, a voice now impossible to silence. They said it was modeling, but it was never about pictures. That truth haunted Jasmine, and now it burned. Her staff tried to draft a statement, some polished apology or carefully worded rebuttal to calm the fire. She didn't bother reading it. She wasn't here to calm anyone down. She was here to make sure no one looked away again. The press conference wasn't held under chandeliers or in marble chambers. It happened on the Capitol steps, under a sky heavy with stormlight. Reporters crowded together, microphones bristling like bayonets. Standing at the podium were three lawmakers, AOC, Jamie Raskin, and Cory Booker, not as politicians, but as a wall. AOC spoke first. Her tone was flat but sharp, slicing through the silence. Jasmine Crockett isn't alone. What we saw wasn't a scandal, it was truth. And for some, truth burns. Then Raskin stepped up, folder in hand, anger barely held behind his calm. This isn't about Democrats or Republicans. It's about power used to harm, and finally exposed. We're calling for a special counsel to investigate every sealed, file every dollar that moved from Epstein's estate into Trump-affiliated accounts. Reporters erupted with questions. Do you think Jasmine Crockett's life is in danger? Are there more victims? Why now? Booker didn't wait. Because silence is complicity, and Jasmine, she broke it. That's why they're attacking her. Not because she lied, but because she refused to shut up. Inside the Capitol, Jasmine watched alone. No entourage, no press, just her, and a hallway that felt too quiet. She had already memorized every threat voicemail, every death wish sent to her inbox. They didn't shake her, but she noted each one. Not for fear, for fuel. She didn't care about the praise either. The hashtags calling her brave, the headlines, the sudden fame. None of it moved her. She didn't want monuments. She wanted subpoenas. She wanted courtrooms. She wanted the men who grinned behind redacted files to finally sweat in open air. An aide entered, awkward. C-SPAN wants you live. NPR 2. MSNBC's offering a primetime sit-down. Jasmine didn't look up from her notes. No. He blinked. Should I at least prep a response? This time, she met his eyes. Let them keep talking. I'm not here for speeches. I'm here to finish this. He nodded, not just in agreement, but in awe. That same night, the first aftershock hit. CNN breaking, exclusive. Former Epstein housekeeper breaks her silence. The woman on screen wasn't crying. She didn't tremble. She spoke like someone who had waited 2 decades for a moment that never came. Until now. I worked at the Palm Beach house, 1995 to 1999. I saw Donald Trump there more than once, sometimes with Epstein, sometimes without. He didn't use the main entrance. The anchor leaned in, jaw tight. Did you ever witness Trump interact with minors? The woman didn't blink. Yes. One of them was in the footage Congress just showed. The nation gasped. Twitter melted down. She saw Trump trended into the night. In the Capitol, phones lit up. Reporters clawed for statements. The hearing chamber swelled with tension. Jasmine sat at her desk, watching quietly. An aide peeked in. "Have you seen the CNN clip?" She nodded. "She's not the only one." 9:47 p.m. Representative Raskin filed for emergency hearing expansion. New testimony directly contradicts Trump's sworn statements. We have a duty to reopen this investigation. By 2 a.m., the vote passed. The Capitol's lights stayed on. The list of new witnesses was being drawn up. Trump's lawyers went ballistic. One called it trial by media. Another threatened lawsuits. But it was too late. The woman had signed a sworn affidavit. Her words were now part of the official record. She couldn't be erased. Jasmine opened the second folder in her drawer, marked with one word, witnesses. Inside, 5 names, all women, all alive. She focused on one, Marissa Delgado, 42, former model, from El Paso, escaped Epstein's circle in 2001 after 2 abortions and a year of silence. She wasn't interested in memoirs or camera interviews. She was ready to testify, under oath. Jasmine circled her name in red ink. This wasn't about the past anymore. It was about those still breathing, still willing to risk everything for the truth. No new hearing was scheduled, because now it didn't need a date. It was already happening, in every hallway, every headline, every whispered conversation, beneath Capitol lights. A reporter spoke into a mic just outside. "This isn't just another scandal. This is a national reckoning, and we're watching it unfold live." Inside her office, Jasmine stood by the window. The Capitol gleamed, under a sky that had turned to glass. Behind her, everything trembled. But she didn't. Not because she felt safe, but because she finally knew the system was afraid. Afraid of her calm. Afraid of what came next. The hearing resumed under dead silence. Not reverence, but fear. Jasmine walked to the podium. No introduction, no speech, just a second USB drive. She slid it into the console. The screen blinked, then played a video. Donald Trump. Under oath. 2019. His voice echoed through the chamber, and the room held its breath. Because what came next would change everything. They say history doesn't repeat. It trembles. And on that night, the walls of Congress were shaking. It started like a whisper on cable news, just a red banner at the bottom of the screen. Breaking. Former Epstein staffer steps forward. But by the time she began to speak, America wasn't just watching it, it was holding its breath. She sat in a shadowed studio, no makeup, no drama. Just steady eyes and hands folded in her lap, like someone who had held something in for far too long. "I worked at the Palm Beach house," she said. "I saw Donald Trump there, more than once, sometimes with Epstein, sometimes without." The anchor leaned in. "Did you ever see him speak to minors?" A pause. Then, "Yes. One of them is the same girl Congress showed in that clip." And just like that, the silence cracked. Twitter caught fire. Newsrooms across the country scrambled. Within an hour, Capitol Hill was buzzing like a hive of cornered wasps. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She watched the footage from her office, stone still, her pen tapping once on a folder marked Witnesses. Inside were 5 names. 5 women who had waited years to be believed. One stood out, Marissa Delgado, a name buried under old modeling contracts and sealed depositions. She had vanished from the spotlight in 2001. But Jasmine knew she hadn't disappeared. She had survived. Marissa was ready, not for a book deal, not for TV, but for the oath. At 2 a.m., the House committee voted to reopen the hearing. Not because they wanted to, because they had to. Truth doesn't knock twice, and when the hearing resumed, it didn't feel like politics anymore. It felt like judgment. Jasmine. Crockett approached the podium with the kind of calm that doesn't ask for attention. It demands it. She inserted a flash drive. The screen behind her flickered. There he was. Trump, 2019 deposition, under oath. "I've never been to Epstein's house," he said. "Wouldn't even know where it is." Jasmine let the clip roll, then pressed pause. "Let's test that," she said, and turned. The next image, a faded guest log dated March 19, 1997. A name written in bold black ink, Donald J. Trump. Below it, private entry. Gasps. Silence. Attention so sharp it felt like glass underfoot. Jasmine's voice didn't rise. It cut. This logbook was sealed in 2008. It was rediscovered 2 weeks ago in a mislabeled archive. "Mr. Trump, you swore under oath you'd never been there." Trump stared, jaw tight. His lawyers bristled. Marjorie Taylor Greene turned pale. "Trump," finally muttered, "could have been forged. People sign names all the time." Jasmine nodded, "Which is why we verified it." New slide. A forensic match. The guest book signature aligned perfectly with Trump's tax forms, real estate filings, even his old checks. Not a question. A match. "And just so we're clear," Jasmine said, eyes locked on the panel, "lying to Congress is a federal crime." Trump didn't speak. He couldn't, and Jasmine wasn't done. She reached for another folder, yellowed, labeled bankruptcy file, Epstein Estate, 2001. She held it like something radioactive. This file was sealed by a Florida judge during Epstein's bankruptcy, marked confidential, never to see daylight. But 2 weeks ago, a journalist leaked a copy, straight to my office. The room went still, every heartbeat echoed. She flipped to page 11, column 3, line 47. The screen changed again, a payment record, dated, itemized, a 7-figure transfer labeled Private Consultation, DJT Holdings. No explanation, no footnote, just a name, a $sign, and a silence that screamed. Reporters outside whispered into live mics, "This isn't just a hearing. This is the beginning of something bigger." Inside, Jasmine closed the folder. Then she leaned forward. "The question isn't whether he lied. It's whether we still care when someone does." She didn't need to raise her voice. Room had already gone cold. And somewhere outside, as dawn crept toward the Capitol dome, the reckoning continued. Not on TV, not in headlines, but in every heart now forced to ask, what does justice look like when the whole world is finally watching? Capitol Hill, Oversight Committee room, dim, tense, and packed. A low hum ran beneath the silence, cameras adjusting, pens tapping, lungs quietly folding into breathless pause. Jasmine Crockett stood alone at the podium, not towering, not shouting, just still. She didn't need the gavel. The room had already surrendered its attention. She tapped the keyboard. The screen lit up. A video played, grainy, polished by PR. Donald Trump, seated, confident, denying everything. "I've never been to Epstein's property," he said. "Wouldn't even know where it is." He wore a red tie, a smug face, as if this denial had already won. Jasmine didn't react. She let the video run its course, then stopped it with a tap that felt like thunder. "Let's try that again." The image switched. A scan filled the screen. A guest book page, dusty and smudged, but unmistakable. Palm Beach, March 19th, 1997. At the top, bold as brass, Donald J. Trump. Below that, 2 unnamed guests, private entry. The air didn't move. People did, barely. A few mouths parted, whispers cracked like dry leaves. One name caused it. The weight of Trump inked in. Epstein's handwriting graveyard. Marjorie Taylor Greene shifted in her seat. Trump didn't. Jasmine's voice now came like steel. "This document was sealed, misfiled during the 2008 case, found last week. You testified you'd never been there." She turned, not like a prosecutor, but like a coroner identifying a body. "You didn't lie to me," she said. "You lied to the American people." Gasps this time, not loud but layered, truth landing too fast for comfort. Jamie Raskin leaned forward. Staffers texted under the desk. Camera shutters popped like nervous applause. Trump finally spoke. "Could have been forged. A trick, people. Sign things all the time." Jasmine clicked again. Split screen. His signature from tax returns, property deals, marriage licenses, all lined up. The match was perfect. "We verified it. Independently. 3 analysts. 1 DOJ certified," she said. "It's yours." She paused, just long enough for the dread to deepen. "Lying under oath to Congress is a felony," she said, turning back to the panel, "and we all know it." No one from Trump's side said a word. Jasmine didn't gloat. She simply reached for a second folder. Manila, faintly yellowed. One label, Epstein bankruptcy, 2001, sealed. She opened it slowly, like unfolding something that had once been buried. This file wasn't supposed to exist. A court sealed it, but 2 weeks ago, a copy landed in my office. Trump flinched. His lawyer leaned in, too late. Jasmine turned to the screen. Page 11, line 47, Victoria's Elite Model S Series, 1997-2000. Underwriter, DT Holdings, LLC. Address, 725 Fifth Avenue, NYC, Trump Tower. No gasps this time. Just a long collective freeze, like the room had stepped off the edge and was still falling. "These weren't print models," she said. "These were girls funneled through Epstein's events. Some underage, some never identified, most never found." Trump opened his mouth, but his lawyer's hand said no. Cameras caught it. He stayed silent. Jasmine tapped again. The screen now showed a web of shell companies, 4 dissolved, 1 still active, registered in Delaware. All linked by wiring trails straight to a contract revealed just days ago. Epstein's money, Trump Tower's fingerprints. Raskin whispered, "Subpoena all of it." Jasmine didn't stop. Page 14, Clause 12B. B. Signatories and beneficiaries shall remain confidential unless compelled by criminal subpoena. "These girls didn't just vanish," Jasmine said. "They were buried in legal ink, numbers, contracts with no faces." Another tap. A contract. ID flashed on screen, matched to the night of a Victoria's Secret event caught on tape. The girl in the video may not have been invited. She may have been purchased. The sound in the chamber turned raw. Breath choked. History buckled. "The question," Jasmine said, "isn't who attended. It's who bankrolled the machine that swallowed them." Trump sat motionless, not silent, but stripped. And then, without warning, he stood. The chair screamed backward. No words, no plan, just a man unraveling. Rage under skin, teeth clenched too tight to talk. "I'm done," he growled. "This is beneath me." But the room didn't move, because no one believed that anymore. The screen behind Jasmine flickered. One more slide. A file appeared. Victoria's Elite Model S Series, 1997 through 2000. It sounded like an archive from a fashion magazine, until she added, "Anonymous partial underwriter, DT Holdings, LLC." She let the room absorb it, then continued, cool and clear. "Linked to 725 Fifth Avenue, Trump Tower." No gasps this time, just stillness, like someone had hit pause on the whole room. "These weren't modeling contracts," Jasmine said, her voice dipping like a needle into a wound. "These were recruitment agreements, routed through Jeffrey Epstein's network, paid for by shell companies, most of them hidden, until now." She let that hang. Then tapped the clicker again. A list appeared, shell corporations, obscure and hollow, one still active, all of them tied together by one common thread, money, and Trump Tower again. "Trump didn't just attend those shows," she said. "He helped fund them. There was a stir, movement from Trump's side. He leaned forward, his mouth parting, words lining up like soldiers. But his lawyer caught his arm. A quiet grip. A warning. He sat back down, blinking like a man seeing snow in summer. Jasmine clicked once more. Now came the contracts. Page after page of carefully hidden names, or rather missing ones. Clause 12B, beneficiaries remain confidential unless compelled by criminal subpoena. The girls? Never named. Never found. She flipped to one page marked with red. This, she said, matches a ledger entry made by Epstein on the night of the Victoria's Secret event. You could feel the tension, tighter than the lights, above their heads. That girl, Jasmine said, not looking away from the page, may not have been invited. She may have been contracted. A few gasps now, soft, sharp, almost like crying. But the question, Jasmine said, turning to the committee, and beyond them, to the country, isn't just who funded these events. It's who disappeared beneath the paperwork, the numbers, the silence. Trump didn't speak. He didn't need to. His face said it all. Not fury, not denial, but something older, something more tired, a reckoning. Then Jasmine turned the knife. What if that girl in the tape wasn't just there? What if she was owned? You could hear hearts pounding in the microphones. Raskin muttered to an aide, "Subpoena it all." Trump stared at the screen like it was showing him his own autopsy. Then he stood. No warning. No cue. Just rage, boiling up through a body that couldn't hold it anymore. His chair screeched backwards, metal on marble, pain in sound form. Reporters froze. Phones pointed. Security moved but didn't stop him. He was walking out, not away from a hearing, away from the truth. "I'm done," Trump muttered, the words brittle as old wood. This is beneath the presidency, beneath this country. His lawyer reached out, tried to stall him, but Trump shook him off. Marjorie Taylor Greene called after him, "Don't give them the win!" But it was already too late. He shoved open the side door, walked into the hallway, alone. Back in the chamber, the screen still glowed behind him. The guest book, his signature. Jasmine didn't smile, didn't smirk. She walked slowly to the center of the room, turned toward the live feed, not the committee, not the chairman, and spoke directly to the country. He may leave this room, but he won't leave this moment. That sentence echoed. Not just in the chamber, not just in D.C., but everywhere. Across feeds, across networks, across living rooms in Missouri, and phones in Detroit and morning shows in Atlanta. He won't leave this moment. The internet caught it instantly. Screenshotted, clipped, posted, reposted, captioned, stitched into speeches. Not a scandal, a shift. Inside, Jasmine returned to her chair. No gloat, no relief, just resolve. Like someone who knew the real work was only beginning. And outside? It was already spreading. By morning, D.C. had changed. Crowds lined the Capitol. Steps, black clothes, red signs, across cardboard and T-shirts and bare arms. One phrase, bold and unmistakable. She showed us the tape. Survivors marched, from Oakland to Charlotte, duct tape across their mouths, fists raised in silence, until they reached the cameras. Then, one by one, they pulled the tape off. On the Capitol steps, a woman with trembling hands lifted a megaphone. "They told us to forget," she said, voice cracking, "but she made them remember." The phrase swept through the country like wind through dry grass. Cable anchors dropped their scripts. Late-night shows dumped the jokes. Jasmine wasn't just in the news. She was in poems, in murals, in whispered conversations between mothers and daughters who finally had the words. But praise wasn't all that came. The threats began too. Emails with no subject lines, envelopes with bullet casings, voicemails that simply whispered, "We're coming." The Capitol Police offered 24-hour protection. Jasmine declined the escort. But fear had found her anyway. Her mother called one night, voice shaking. "Are you safe, baby?" Jasmine looked out her window, down at the street. Crowds chanting her name, not like a celebrity, but like a warrior returned. "I'm not safe," she said quietly. "Not yet, but I'm louder than their silence now." And that silence, the one that used to smother, was crumbling. It couldn't hold back the noise anymore. Because Jasmine didn't just expose something. She ignited something. And it wasn't going out. Not tonight. Not now. Not ever. Didn't wait for the closing remarks. Didn't shake hands. Didn't even bother to fake composure. Trump, jaw tight, fists clenched, eyes refusing to look back, walked out like a man trying to escape gravity. One of his lawyers reached for him, whispered something last minute, but he brushed it off like lint. Marjorie Taylor Greene yelled after him. Something about, "Don't let them win." But he was already halfway down the hallway, trying to outrun the one thing he never could. A truth finally spoken out. Loud. Back in the chamber, Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch, didn't smirk. She didn't even look at him leave. She just stood. Not for the committee, not for the chairman, but for the camera, beaming straight into millions of homes. Her voice cut through the room like steel. "He can leave the room, but he won't leave this moment." That sentence, 16 words, did more damage than anything shouted at a rally. Because this wasn't a mic drop. It was a mirror held up to a nation. Outside, flashbulbs exploded like tiny storms. Journalists surged forward. Trump didn't speak to them. He didn't have to. His silence said it all. A silence that reeked of panic, not power. A silence that couldn't stop what was now echoing through every phone screen, live feed, and broadcast loop in America. He won't leave this moment. That clip caught fire. It was everywhere before he even made it to his car. And while the machine tried to spin, Jasmine walked calmly back to her seat. Not victorious, but resolute. Around her, people sat in stunned silence, watching history harden into something irreversible. Because the walkout wasn't strength, it was fear. And across the country, people weren't asking, "Where did he go?" They were asking, "Why did he run? Why did he run?" Act 2, the tape. By sunrise, the streets outside courthouses, news stations, Capitol steps were no longer quiet. They were full of people, full of memory, full of one phrase printed in red. She showed us the tape. On shirts, on signs, on mouths, drawn with tape across lips. Survivors marched, some in silence, some with fists raised. And when the cameras found them, they peeled the tape from their mouths like pulling back decades of shame. One woman stood at the Capitol, voice shaking in the wind. "They told us to forget." She made them remember. Online, it was everywhere. She showed as the tape trended in 30-plus states, not because it was catchy, but because it was true. And the truth, once buried under settlements, PAC money, sealed NDAs, had finally found a mouth that didn't flinch. Jasmine Crockett wasn't just in the news. She was in the poems, in the songs, in the hands of daughters who, for the first time, saw themselves in someone who didn't blink. ACT third, the cost. But with every tribute came a threat. No subject, lines, just coordinates. No return addresses, just bullet casings, no names, just whispers. "We're coming." Her security tripled. Capitol Police insisted on an escort. She said no. But fear had already found her family. Her mother called late at night, voice trembling. "Are you safe, baby? They've got your picture everywhere." Jasmine looked out the window at the crowds chanting her name, half protest, half prayer, and said quietly, "Not yet. but I'm louder than their silence now. That silence, once used like a weapon, was breaking. NDAs were unraveling. Law students combed through bankruptcies like sacred text. And somewhere deep, inside the DOJ, the pressure built. The subpoenas came. Not rumors, not leaks, real ones, with signatures. Asked T4, the vote. When the vote came, the chamber didn't buzz. It held its breath. 7-4, 4 against. The gavel didn't just fall, it landed. The oversight. Committee officially called for a federal investigation into Trump's financial ties to Jeffrey Epstein. Within the hour, the Department of Justice released its statement. A formal inquiry has begun. Campaign finance, witness tampering, sealed NDAs, nothing off limits. No more speculation, no more spin. Just law. And Jasmine, she didn't give interviews. She didn't tweet. She walked out of the chamber, coat over one arm, bag low, heels clicking on marble like a metronome of history. It had started to rain, cold, straight, the kind that doesn't pour, just insists. An aide rushed beside, her phone in hand. CNN wants you at 9. Rachel Maddow offered. She raised a hand. Quiet. Final. This wasn't the moment for a headline. This was the moment to let the silence speak for itself. Behind her, the Capitol glowed. She didn't look back. Because what mattered wasn't applause. It was the shift beneath the seats of power. A fault line had opened, and it had her name on it. Final scene. The note. No cameras. No press. Just a note. Folded. Handwritten. Delivered by a security guard. The woman from the gallery. She wants to see you. Just you. Jasmine read it once. Folded it back. Nodded. Some meetings don't need statements. Some moments don't need microphones. Because when truth finally speaks and the lies start running, the real work begins. And Jasmine didn't leave the Capitol that night as a politician. She left as a reckoning. A storm had cracked open the sky above D.C., but inside the Capitol the silence was louder than thunder. Jasmine Crockett didn't just make headlines that day. She made history, but not the kind they frame on a wall, the kind that crawls into the bones of a nation and refuses to leave. The committee vote was over, 7-4, 4 against. The they gavel dropped, not like a formality, like a sentence. Donald Trump's financial ties to Jeffrey Epstein were now the subject of an official federal investigation. The Department of Justice released a statement within the hour. Quiet, direct, unapologetic. They were opening the books, on sealed NDAs, on suspicious campaign donations, on silences that had lasted decades too long. Outside, reporters swarmed like bees let loose from a broken hive. Lights flashed. Questions flew. But Jasmine? She didn't speak. She didn't wave to the cameras. She didn't bask in the glory. She just walked. Her coat draped over one arm, bag low, heels sharp against the Capitol floor like a metronome, counting down a new rhythm in American justice. It had started to rain. That cold, thin kind of rain that doesn't drench you, it chills you. The kind that feels like truth. No umbrella, no entourage, no performance. Just her and the shift she had set into motion. A young staffer caught up with her, phone in hand. CNN at 9. Rachel Maddow offered the closing segment. Even Colbert's people were asking. Jasmine raised one hand, not to refuse, but to pause. Some moments don't need microphones. Some revolutions begin in silence. Behind her, the Capitol glowed like a relic. She didn't look back, because what mattered wasn't applause. It was that, for the first time in a very long time, something had moved in the foundations of power. And it moved because one woman refused to wait for permission. And then came the note. Not an email, not a headline, Just a folded piece of paper, handed off quietly by a Capitol guard. The woman from the gallery. She wants to see you. Just you. They met in a room nobody ever filmed. No press, no pretense, just two women and the truth between them. She was already sitting when Jasmine walked in, holding a manila envelope like it contained air she couldn't breathe without. Her hands clutched it so tight they trembled. She looked up. No introduction, no tears. Just a mother whose grief had outlived outrage. Jasmine didn't sit. Not yet. She stood beside her in stillness, not out of awkwardness, but respect. She knew that what lived inside that envelope wasn't just paper. It was pain. The woman slid a single photo across the table. A girl, 17 maybe, lace at the shoulders, a white dress, a crooked smile. The kind of smile girls wear before they know how dangerous the world can be. "That's Adrian," the woman said, her voice barely louder than the rain outside. "She was mine." Jasmine didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. Adrian's name had never made the news, never been spoken aloud in a courtroom. But Jasmine knew. That photo wasn't just a memory. It was a face that had sat next to men like Donald Trump, used, discarded, buried beneath sealed records and broken laws. And now, finally, it had a witness. "She mattered," the woman whispered. "No one ever said that out loud. Until you." And Jasmine? She didn't flinch. She reached across the table, took her hand. Not for comfort, for truth. This wasn't performance. This was promise. The next night, under the sterile glare of CNN studio lights, Jasmine sat alone. No makeup artist, no speech, just a chair, a camera, a nation holding its breath. The anchor asked the question that had been burning on every screen in America. "Congresswoman, after everything, the threats, the tape, the walkout, what do you want the country to remember?" Jasmine looked down, just for a second. Then she lifted her gaze. Not to the anchor, to the lens, to the people. "To anyone watching this," she said, "I want you to know, silence is the most dangerous form of power, because it doesn't scream, it hides, and it lets the guilty rest while the wounded carry the weight." She didn't blink. Her voice didn't shake. "And the bravest thing you can do is break it." The room was still. Even the cameras seemed to stop humming. "Speaking truth won't make you famous," she continued. "It won't make you rich. It won't even make you safe, but it will make you free. And once you taste that kind of freedom, you can't go back." The anchor, a veteran, cleared her throat, visibly shaken. "Do you believe justice will come?" she asked. Jasmine smiled, not soft, sharp. "I believe justice begins the moment someone refuses to stay quiet." She didn't win anything that night. No trophies, no medals. But she left that building not as a politician, as a fault line. Because sometimes justice doesn't roar. Sometimes it walks, and it doesn't stop. The Capitol building never truly sleeps. But deep inside one, of its forgotten corners, past polished floors, and behind doors not meant to echo, two women met. No press, no sound bites, no schedule. Just silence and the truth it carried. She was already there when Jasmine arrived, fingers locked around a thin manila envelope like it held more than paper. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes didn't. They'd seen enough grief to know exactly what they were here for. When Jasmine stepped forward, she didn't speak. She just stood beside her, quiet, steady, not waiting, honoring. The envelope, opened like a wound. A single photo slid across the table. A girl, maybe 17, lace on her shoulders, a crooked smile full of unbroken trust. "That's Adrian," the woman said, voice small but unshaking. My sister. The name cracked the air in half. Jasmine didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. The story was already written in every courtroom file never unsealed, in every closed-door laugh, in every forgotten face buried by money and shame. What mattered now wasn't the photo. It was the fact someone had dared to bring it back into the light. The woman reached out, hesitant, unsure. Jasmine met her halfway. Their hands locked, not in greeting, not in sympathy, but in an unspoken vow that Adrian's name would never be buried again. When the woman finally stood, the envelope pressed to her chest like a heartbeat returned, she walked taller. Jasmine watched her go, not as a politician, as a witness. When the door closed, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a beginning. Scene 2, breaking the silence on live TV. Later that week, Jasmine sat beneath harsh studio lights. No stylist, no script. Just her, a chair, and a question the nation was still afraid to ask out loud. "After everything," the anchor said softly, "what do you want America to remember?" Jasmine looked down, not to find strength, but to choose the truth that mattered most. Then she stared straight into the lens. "I want them to remember that silence is the most dangerous kind of power," she said, "because it doesn't just protect abusers. It erases the people they hurt." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Truth delivered quietly can still break stone. "Breaking silence won't make you a hero," she continued. "It won't make you rich. It might make you a target, but it makes you free. And once you know that kind of freedom, you can't go back." The anchor cleared her throat. "Do you believe justice is coming?" Jasmine didn't flinch. "Justice begins," she said, "the moment someone tells the truth and refuses to sit down when the world tells them to shut up." Scene 3, Adrian's name carved in echo. Phones lit up across the country. In kitchens, on night shifts, in quiet cars parked outside therapy centers. Her quote, "Silence is the most dangerous power," spread like fire in a dry forest. On TikTok, survivors stitched it over their own faces. On Facebook, mothers added Adrian's name to memorial threads once filled with only initials. It wasn't just a moment. It was a signal. Outside CNN, protesters stood beneath a fading sky. Their signs didn't demand vengeance. They demanded recognition. "Say her name, Adrian. Truth has a face." But Jasmine wasn't watching. The protests. She didn't need to. Her words were already walking. Scene 4, Martha's voice rises. It started in a church basement in Chicago. 10 survivors, folding chairs, cold coffee. No fanfare, just pain, finally given shape. They called it Martha's voice, after Jasmine's grandmother, the woman who taught her never to blink under pressure. Soon there were 30 in Atlanta, then hundreds, then chapters, not just marches, blueprints. They didn't build statues. They built clinics. They didn't write slogans. They wrote laws. They created a hotline, legal support, scholarships for girls who'd been silenced by the very systems that once tried to erase Jasmine. They didn't call it justice. They called it fireproofing. Scene 5, the Crockett Bill. Inside the same Capitol halls where secrets had long been currency, Jasmine introduced something different. The Crockett Bill for Congressional Transparency. It demanded that sealed financial records connected to congressional investigations be made public within 5 years. No more buried settlements, no more vanishing paper trails, no more victims paid off into oblivion. Jaime Raskin co-sponsored it. AOC helped write the language. Cory Booker gave the floor speech. But Jasmine? She stood on the Capitol steps. No mic, no entourage, just her name at the top of the bill and the names of all the erased stitched invisibly beneath it. "This isn't about me," she said. "It's about who comes next." Behind her, protest signs had changed. Truth needs teeth. No more sealed silence. We are not your contracts. Scene 6. A legacy you can point to. The media tried to frame it as redemption. Jasmine refused. "I'm not here for a redemption arc," she told a reporter. "I'm here for a record, so the next girl can point and say, 'That's why I wasn't erased.'" Back in her district, murals bloomed. Girls painted her grandmother, gray hair, fierce eyes, a Bible in one hand. Below it, in gold, "Silence ends with us." CNN aired a retrospective called "The Woman Who Brought Down the Wall." But even the anchor closed by saying, "It's not the wall that mattered, it's what she built in its place." Jasmine never saw it. She was busy, on Zoom with survivors in Arizona, helping them draft their own bill. No suit, sleeves rolled, voice tired but unshakable. Because the war didn't end. It just changed shape. Final scene, Adrian's name lives on. The Crockett bill passed committee. Martha's voice raised $2, $4 million in 10 days. And the girl in the photo, Adrian, was honored on the National Registry of Survivors, her name spoken in spaces that once refused to remember her. Can one voice start a movement? Only if it refuses to stay quiet, only if it refuses to be erased, only if it dares to say, "This story doesn't end with silence. It ends with us." The light was fading behind the dome, not suddenly but slowly, like a truth finally taking its place after years in the dark. A woman walked alone down the Capitol steps. No entourage, no speeches, just her, Jasmine Crockett, carrying nothing but the silence she refused to let win. No suit jacket, no lapel pin, just rolled sleeves and bare hands. She didn't need to be framed by power to show she had it. Because the halls she'd just walked out of, they weren't silent anymore. They remembered now. They held the stories this country once tried to bury. And when she paused at the bottom of the marble steps, she didn't look back to admire the building. She looked back to mark it, not as a monument, but as a witness to pain, to courage, to a USB drive that pressed play on something this country couldn't pause. Visual. She stands facing the Capitol, still, silent. No statement, no wave, just her eyes, steady, sharp, unblinking, and a single sentence spoken. Into the air, soft as smoke. Jasmine, V.O. He tried to erase them. We wrote them back in. It wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. Truth doesn't need volume. It needs staying power. And this would stay. Visual. A protest sign leans against a railing half-soaked from rain. It reads, "Say her." Name, Adrian. The cardboard was sagging, the ink slightly smudged, but the message was clear. Not an ending. A continuation. Because stories like Adrian's don't disappear. They get passed on, into laws, into murals, into voices that once trembled but now rise. Jasmine walked on, her steps lighter now, like the burden had shifted, no longer just hers, but carried by many. Behind her, the Capitol loomed, but the longest shadow no longer belonged to the building. It belonged to her. Visual, slow fade to dusk, her figure disappearing into the amber horizon. She didn't look back. She didn't need to, because this wasn't her story anymore. It belonged to the girls who went missing and were never found. To the women who were told to stay quiet and chose to speak anyway. To the names that were hidden behind sealed settlements, now unsealed and unforgettable. Fade to black. Text on screen, slow reveal. For every voice that was buried, this story is for you. Visual. Black and white footage of small hands painting a mural of an older black woman. Stern eyes, silver hair, Bible in hand. The wall reads, "Silence ends with us." Narrator, V.O. It ends. They didn't build statues. In her name, they built clinics, legal funds, helplines, classrooms. The bill she inspired? It passed committee. The nonprofit she seeded? It raised millions in days. And the girl in the tape, Adrian. Her name is now honored on a national registry of survivors. No longer a whisper, a name carved in stone. This was never about Jasmine's redemption. She told a reporter, "Jasmine, clip, I don't need a redemption arc. I need a record, so the next girl knows she's not crazy, not invisible, not alone." Visual, Jasmine on a Zoom call. No blazer, just a hoodie and tired eyes, helping survivors in Arizona craft a local ordinance. The war didn't end. It just changed shape, but someone lit a match in that hearing room, and now the fire's spreading. Outro. If someone you love was ever silenced, would you speak for them now? If this story stirred something in you, don't just scroll. Like, share, subscribe to Mr. Truth Stories. This is where silence gets challenged, where the erased get written back in, and where the next story might just help rewrite history. Tap the bell, because the truth doesn't go viral on its own. Drop a comment. What moment made you stop and hold your breath? Remembering isn't passive, it's power.